Why exactly do we love horror so much? It is a genre that is meant to frighten, to instill a sense of uneasy fear into the consumer. It sounds odd that anyone would purposely subject themselves to that. And yet, it seems we just cannot get enough of it. According to Bloomberg, in 2023, horror movies grossed almost $800 million domestically. BBC News reported that renowned horror author Stephen King alone has sold more than 350 million copies of his terrifying books. But why? Why are we shelling out that amount of money just to be scared out of our minds? I racked my brain for a solution to this conundrum, and I think I have found the answer. Horror is scary. I've had a theory that fear and attraction are actually not that different from each other, and this can be best seen within the horror genre. So, to prove it, I went in search of some expert opinions. Associate Professor Haiyan Yang, a behavioral scientist at Johns Hopkins University, writes on this topic. He explains, stimulation is one of the driving forces behind the consumption of horror. Exposure to terrifying acts like stories of demonic possession or alien infestation can be stimulating both mentally and physically. To me, this implies that not only do we like to think about it, but there is an actual involuntary physiological response to being scared. So how exactly are we stimulated by horror? In an article from Refinery 29, Dr. Holly Richmond, PhD, a somatic psychologist, also explores this phenomenon. The article states that typically when we're scared, our body has a few natural and hormonal responses. Our adrenaline and cortisol levels go up, and blood goes to our extremities. Additionally, the article features the insight of Margie Kerr, a sociologist and fear researcher at the University of Pittsburgh. She states, the typical response to threat involves our sympathetic nervous system, ramping our body into go mode. This includes increased respiration and heart rate, sweating, and a host of chemicals, neurotransmitters, and hormones that kick our metabolism into high gear. Essentially, Kerr says that we reprioritize our attention and resources to focus on survival in the here and now. It sounds to me that this is the state that we experience within both fear and intimacy, which are both natural human conditions. So what exactly happens to our bodies when we watch horror? What are the mechanics here? In an article from Everyday Health, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Steven Schultzman expands on this very topic. The article states that this involuntary response can have a major effect on your body, causing it to release adrenaline. These physiological changes increase the oxygen supply to our brain and muscles. The article continues to explain the changes in the body while in this state. Specifically, that one example of these chemicals is endorphins. Painkillers your body produces naturally, whose feel-good effects have been compared with morphine. Your body's production of chemicals can be caused by exercise, emotional stress, or them, and watching a really terrifying movie can trigger the same effect. The article continues with informing us that another chemical that Dr. Schultzman says you can expect to experience during a scary situation is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that communicates messages across different parts of the body and carries with it pleasurable feelings, similar to those imparted by endorphins. In fact, one study published in 2018 in the journal Nature Communications suggested that over time, exposure to dopamine may actually lessen our overall reaction to fear. And this is not just all theoretical. It is very likely that we experience this in our daily lives. I know for a fact that it's happened to me. One of my all-time favorite horror scenes comes from the TV show American Horror Story, the Freak Show season. It is where the mythological and foreboding figure of Edward Mordrake arises from the underworld and slowly approaches the flirtatious Elsa Mars, played by the iconic Jessica Lange. This imagery, combined with a sultry rendition of Lana Del Rey's Gods and Monsters, made for an unforgettable ambiance. And I'll be honest, this scene lives in my head rent-free to this very day. There was something just so darkly alluring to the scene that both terrified and yet intrigued me. So this got me thinking beyond the physiological impacts. Why is it that I would feel so drawn to a potentially dangerous and unpredictable scene? Professor Yang explains, horror entertainment can also provide a novel experience, like a zombie apocalypse, that doesn't necessarily happen in the real world. At the same time, horror entertainment is a safe way to satisfy a curiosity about the dark side of humanity through storylines and characters facing the darkest parts of the human condition. He continues to say that in order to enjoy horror, we need one of several protective frames. He writes that it involves our sense of control and confidence in managing the dangers we encounter. We can still get a thrill from a good scare if we feel confident about controlling and overcoming the perceived danger. Basically, horror allows the consumer to vicariously experience situations and subjects which are socially taboo, yet riddled with morbid curiosity. It's a safe level of escapism that also provides psychological preparedness. Additionally, horror relies heavily on a sense of vulnerability. In my opinion, this can also mirror human sexuality, which explains the perplexing overlap between the two. In fact, many horror works outright highlight this connection with blatant erotic imagery, although this is not necessarily required for experiencing the sensuality of being scared. So, if you find yourself drawn in by Dracula, or slowing your pace to meet the cutie with the chainsaw, just know you are not alone. We are all secretly hooking up with horror.